has to tell a joke.
It's a lot of pressure. So a priest, a rabbi, and an imam walk into a bar.
Yeah.
And the bartender says, "What is this? Some kind of joke?"
I know a lot of those jokes. I used to know those jokes.
There's too many. There's too many. I heard a lot of them from my rabbi back in the day. So.
Are you involved at Temple Beth Israel?
I am not. No, I haven't really been involved in the local Jewish community in some years.
But he knows his stuff backwards and forwards.
Oh, thank you, David.
That's because he was raised in a good Jewish home that sent him to learn it.
Thank you. It's true.
Yeah.
It's
True.
Looks like we have two people besides us on now, and it's
Good.
almost time for me to start.
Okay, can we just, before you start, can I ask Reverend Phillip to just try your, Reverend Phillip, could you unmute yourself and just speak so we can get a volume? There you go. Just say a few more things.
It's still muted.
You're muted.
Yeah, Phillip, you're still muted.
Okay, there we go.
Okay, say a few more
Good
things.
morning or good afternoon. Good afternoon, I mean.
Very good.
A rabbi, a priest, and a...
No. All right, Suzanne's going to start, and I'm going to mute myself, okay?
Okay.
All right.
There we go.
Welcome.
Welcome.
Welcome, everybody.
Welcome, everybody.
Welcome all to our Access Forum,
Welcome all to our Access Forum,
sponsored by the Unitarian Universalist Church Nation Community.
sponsored by the Unitarian Universalist Church in Eugene Community.
This is co-sponsored by CareWorks of Lake County.
And this is co-sponsored by CareWorks of Lane County. Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you. Thank you for the extra music, Susan Giordano.
Thank you for the extra music, Suzanne Giordana.
I am David W. Oaks.
I am David W. Oaks.
We would especially like to welcome all marginalized and disempowered people,
We would especially like to welcome all marginalized and disempowered people,
which, by the way, marginalized and disempowered, mad.
which, by the way, marginalized and disempowered, mad.
Our special guest today will be my wonderful friend, Reverend Phillip Schulman.
Our special guest today will be my wonderful friend, Reverend Phillip Schulman.
Here is the order of the Access Forum today.
Here's the order of the Access Forum today. I'll pull this up really quick.
By the way, Ian, my care worker, is amazing.
By the way, Ian, my care worker, is amazing.
So, if you need ASL,
So,
Patrick Galasso is providing this signing. Please look for Zoom.
so if you need ASL interpreting, Patrick Galasso is providing this signing. So please look for his Zoom.
If you have any access problem, please chat message to volunteer Julie Baumler.
If you have any access problem, please chat message directly to volunteer Julie Baumler.
Yeah, and we send our love and support to Jones D. Hollister Accessibility Committee Chair.
We send out our love and support to Jones D. Hollister, Accessibility Committee Chair.
We especially send our love and support to their family during these challenging times.
And we especially send our love and support to their family during these challenging times.
Now, Susan Giordano will light the chalice.
Now Suzanne Giordano will light the chalice.
After that, Susan will play the UU hymn, There's a River Flowing in My Soul.
After that, she will play the UU hymn, There's a River Flowing in My Soul.
And we'll have the lyrics which you can sing along with.
And we'll have the
wherever-
lyric. Sorry.
Wherever you are,
And we'll have the lyrics so you can sing along with wherever you are.
after the melody.
After the melody.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We affirm that every one of us is held in creation's hand, a part of the interdependent web, and hence strangers need not be enemies, that no one is saved until we all are saved, where all means the whole of creation. I'll do a short intro and change mics.
Should we switch?
fall.
Wonderful, beautiful.
Now I would like to introduce my wonderful and amazing friend, Reverend Phillip Schulman.
Now, I'd like to introduce my wonderful and amazing friend, Reverend Phillip Schulman.
I love the title,
I love the title.
The Struggle and Dignity of a Minister with Traumatic Brain Injury.
The struggle and dignity of a minister with traumatic brain injury.
Post-traumatic spiritual gifts.
Post-traumatic spiritual gifts.
This 1989 graduate of UU Starr King School for the Ministry led for UU congregations.
This 1989 graduate of the UU Starr King School for the Ministry led 4 congregations.
Community organizer, director of various holistic and peer support programs.
A community organizer and the director of various holistic and peer support programs.
Advocate for rights of some survivors.
Advocate for the rights of system survivors.
He directed the Crisis Alternative Program, one of the first peer-run crisis respites.
He directed a crisis alternative program, one of the first peer-run crisis respites.
I call him my mad movement minister.
I call him the Mad Movement Minister.
He's a lifelong student of nonviolence organizing.
And he's a lifelong student of nonviolence organizing.
And in 2017, a half-ton truck struck my friend while he was on a bike.
In 2017, a half-ton truck struck my friend while he was on a bike,
leaving him with a traumatic brain injury.
leaving him with a traumatic brain injury.
By the way, Phillip also helped marry my wife, Deborah, who's behind me waving, so it's dark.
By the way, Phillip also helped marry me to my wife who is waving, so it's stuck.
When I broke my neck, except for Deborah and my brother, Phillip was there.
When I broke my neck, except for Deborah and my brother, Phillip was there
Months.
for months.
Thank you, Phillip.
Thank you, Phillip.
Thank you, David. Can you hear me? Great. I'm very moved by what you just said, David, and I'm grateful to you congregation of Eugene and the inclusiveness, what it's called, accessibility committee for sponsoring, and we got a little technical difficulties here, but I'll ignore it and just keep talking, hopefully. So, yeah, I'm very excited to be here. I can only begin to tell you what it means. I miss parish ministry more than I can say. And about a year after my accident, I actually put my name in a hat and was offered a part-time position. But after reflection, with the UU congregation, I realized that I wasn't ready. And to be asked to preach, share my story, tell about both of these are great honors, and I'm grateful for them. One time when I was in the summer, I had been serving 2 congregations, but I had time off in the summer. I noticed that I wasn't, I thought I was slipping on my values, on my spiritual practices, and I had this thought that I don't practice what I preach. And then I realized, wait a minute, I'm not preaching. How can I practice what I preach if I'm not preaching? So thank you for getting another chance. It's Sunday afternoon, so I want to tell me more my experience in preaching. But it is important for all of us to preach, to speak up. One of my mentors from seminary, Reverend Bob Kimball, he said that we stop speaking up, and then we stop thinking about it, the things that we are not speaking about, and then we stop noticing. So it's an important part in that. So thank you very much. And a little bit more about David and I and Unitarian Universalism, putting this whole thing together a little bit going on. So as David alluded to, my officiating the wedding, I was actually telling David about Unitarian Universalism many years before he set foot in there in June, the sanctuary. And I saw in David a kindred spirit and so many key Unitarian Universalist traditions. His love of nature, his love of learning. With this learning, it's not just academic. It's also poetic, and finding in science and many sources reasons for awe and wonder and curiosity to engage this mystery. So I'm not surprised you have it up there. And I forgot the last one. Most of all, David is a world-class human rights organizer. That's how I first met him. And that's part of our Unitarian Universalist prophetic tradition. It's not just David is a graduate of Harvard, but he didn't go out chasing after those six figures. He is after I have been telling your story, a pinch of it, David, but after an experience in college where, well, I skipped the details, lived them for him, but his altered experience led him to, and people's response to it, him getting locked up in a psych hospital. And he is dedicated, the rest of his life, he's been a strong advocate, make sure that nobody should have to endure what he did, forced treatment, but many other forms of abuse and mistreatment for being labeled with a psychiatric label or mental health label, mental illness label, etc. And that's the context that I met David, and that's the context when he asked me this time and many other campaigns, Philip, would you do this? And in this case, to speak on this forum on mental disability, to share a little bit of my experience? Yes, of course. Now, actually, there's some hesitation for several reasons that I might touch on, but when it comes to his leadership and this movement in general, and seeing an opportunity to hopefully share my experience, and in a way that I've learned will be useful to others, and hopefully even continue a little to advance all of our efforts to work towards that beloved community, towards that world and society where there's not just justice for all, but the dignity of every person is affirmed. So I hope my experiences that I will share will be useful to you, that you will relate to them and useful to you in that endeavor and all the things that I've mentioned so far. That's the ministry part. Yeah, I mentioned that I was reluctant, and first off, the disability part, and actually a little bit more you too, because I'm speaking from my experience. I'm not claiming to have the truth. In fact, I think in common we believe, and I believe, none of us have the truth, capital T. So we are students, we are learners. And on this topic in particular, I have expertise about what happened to me, but I have a lot to learn about not just recovery, but accessibility and how to think about different people with different disabilities and abilities. And so if anything I said rubs you the wrong way or doesn't make sense to you, in advance, I beg your patience and remember that I'm giving my experience, yours will be different, and remember the intention and the goal that we want to learn, to all of us to continue to keep learning how to work to a day where everyone is treated with respect and dignity and human rights. So on the hesitation, disability is not a word that I embraced, and still it's coming, it's only because it's useful. But yeah, it's very useful, not just for me, but and more in the sense I've realized in terms of social change. But labels are there are great political dangers to labels. And personally, I don't want to identify with as label. I don't want to be not just being seen as disabled. We all have disabilities. I have disabilities. I have imperfections. And one of the greatest spiritual gifts of this experience from being injured, nearly killed, was that I have come to accept that. I have come to, from being at a time after the accident where I was laying in bed, couldn't move at all. Well, that's not true, not at all, but you know, couldn't get out of bed. I had a lot of broken bones and I was totally dependent and very vulnerable. And so, it's very tender, and I was very moved by the support that I gave. And that's leads to a second spiritual gift. But the first one, just coming to this realization, it's not my power, my intelligence, all these things are puny, and it's okay to need support. And I have come to rely that much more on a power and or powers greater than myself, and being part of a greater narrative. These are spiritual gifts. But since our labels and since our thinking is so important in influence in determining which way we go, as I say, well, let me put it this way. The thing I learned in my recovery journey is a healthy respect for denial. I'm thinking about David, and he's talking a lot about climate change deniers. You know, denial is not always a good thing, and in fact, it's mostly negative press. But I will tell you, I made it as far as I did because of denial. Because from the very beginning, I was like, "What am I? Okay, I'm okay. I'll be okay," you know. And because I didn't listen to things like, "Well, you're going to have this and that, for you never be able to do that," you know, because I had this sense of this attitude that was largely in denial of the things that happened. I just kept forward going. And there's some more in that too, about attitude and whatnot. But, and also another spiritual gift there is that, well, I'm going to turn and to my story, prepared a little bit, and ask you to buckle up. You know, it turns out pretty good, the story, but it was a pretty abrupt beginning. And I'll ask you to think many of the things that I have had a lot of wonderful recovery from these things that happened in the beginning. Many of them are still with me. That's the nature of trauma. By definition, it lingers. And there's some aspects often that don't go away. I always I have these, it's not just this, it's not either or, it's both and. That's, if I have one thing to say, you know, I'm not going to be just like, oh, it's all good. The title is Post-Traumatic Spiritual Gifts. And this is not to deny post-traumatic stress, the lingering effects. But that's all we hear, and calling it disorder, that I don't find, for me, I don't find that helpful. And but I'm wanting to be honest about, there have been lingering effects that I could go into, and there might be a benefit of that, but I want to balance it and say that there have been gifts. I just skipped around there. I hope I'm still good. Okay, so as David told you, on November 6th, 2017, my bicycle and I was struck by a half-ton Dodge Ram. And it wasn't known if I would live, talk, or walk again. But here I am. Excuse me. I survived the accident and avoided greater permanent damage because of the proximity of a hospital, because of response by police, EMTs, top-notch surgeons. My recovery has been supported by therapists and technicians. Medical prowess is possible because of the application of sophisticated understanding of nature. And I've tried to glean all the information available to me about my conditions, anatomy and physiology, nutrition, natural remedies to increase my chances of healing. Well, that I mentioned, we'll go back to that fateful day. But actually, the night before it, I had told my brother, no, the night of the fateful day, I had told my brother that I would be to his house or condo kind of late that night by 9 or 10, because the next morning he and I were going on a kayak.
Hey, Philip?
Your video is off.
Yeah, Philip, your video is either cut out or is being covered by something.
Can you hear me?
We can hear you fine. We just disappeared.
Actually, can hear you better.
Actually, we can hear you better since then.
Well, I'm gonna take for a few minutes. I'm gonna read from this. I'm sorry, but just a couple anyway.
It's very nice.
Yeah, your thumb is very nice. It's great. Okay, sorry, just letting you know.
Thank you. Well, so when my housemate came home at 6, he saw my car in the driveway and found my cell phone inside charging. He assumed that I'd gone on my bicycle and that I would be back soon. A few days later, I regained consciousness in the hospital intensive care unit. I woke gently as if from a night's sleep. Looking down on my badly broken body, I ached all over. I didn't remember the accident. I remember setting out on my bike. I knew I didn't reach my destination. I put two and two together. Surprisingly, I felt somewhat calm. When the pain medication wore off, I experienced dread. I was lonely and pleased when staff entered my room. Something seemed strange. Was this a movie or a dream? I was in the room, yet it also seemed as if I was on another realm. There was a peculiar silence. Then I realized I couldn't speak. I figured that this condition was a result of the accident and would soon wear off. My acceptance wore off more quickly. I needed to let my brother and others know where I was. I wanted to scream, "I've got something I need to tell you." The staff only understood that I was agitated. Fortunately, my brother soon appeared in my room. The police had contacted him. I felt such relief. There were tears in our eyes. The relief was short-lived. I became frustrated with my inability to communicate or connect with him. When the noise hurt my head, and when he left, I was relieved for the return of quiet. Soon I began communicating with staff by using expressions and sounds. Then came some garbled words. I slept most of the time, and I could tell I was getting better. My condition was improving. My brother's next visit went better. He said that my first word was food. Although relatively peaceful, I felt a strange disorientation. By my room, I couldn't see the street or the sky. I saw only another building with a neon sign. I watched it become dark and light and dark again. It was like time-lapse photography. I couldn't tell how many days went by. I left my room only one time in 10 days, a trip down windowless hallways to an operating room. I was lost in space, disconnected from nature, blurry-headed from my trauma and drugs. I started seeing fantastic images. Have you ever started dreaming before you fell asleep? It was something like that. The things I kept seeing seemed so real. And then I realized my eyes were closed and I opened and images would disappear. When my eyes were open, I did see floating electrons and orbs of light. Fortunately, weird doesn't even faze me. I was curious and amused by these altered states. Well, the noises were more troubling. The beeps, the alarms, even voices hurt my head. There were public service announcements and advertisement for hospital programs being broadcast over a public address system. I kept hearing doctors and nurses talking in the hallway outside my room. They seemed to be talking about me again and again. I wasn't quite sure what was real. It reminded me of a scene from Alice in Wonderland. Again, I assumed that my condition was the result of my accident and would pass. A speech therapist visited me. She said that I was going to get better and it just would take a long time. She said that singing would help me recover my speech. She asked me if I could sing "Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star." I could barely remember the tune. I did a little better with "Happy Birthday." For the next month, I asked everyone I could to sing with me. Someone brought me a letterboard so that I could point and spell. I didn't have much success. Writing didn't work. Writing on paper didn't work much better. The problem was that I was still thinking big words and long, complex sentences. Before I could get my thoughts out, I would forget what I had been trying to communicate. Staff seemed to want to get in and out of the room quickly. Sometimes they caused me physical pain. I lacked the ability for complex conversations that were needed. Within me was a voice. It was my infant voice crying and saying, "No more, I can't take any more." My actual expression was cranky and complaining. I feared that I would alienate my helpers. I knew that if I did make a change, things were not going to go well for me. Fortunately, help was on the way. My former partner, Wynn, had reached out from 1,000 miles away, from Texas to Gainesville, Florida. She contacted the vegan meetup and asked someone to bring me healthy food. Joyce, who had been a student in my nonviolent communication class, responded. She showed up with miso and vegetables and miso goodies, vegan goodies. It was manna from heaven. Her visit was an island of joy in a sea of struggle. That night, I was writhing in pain again. I was emotionally and physically fatigued. This is horrible, I thought. What have I done? I can't handle this. Alone and in despair, I longed for support and imagined there was none to be had. I felt hopelessness overtaking me. And then one thought caused a shift. I remembered Joyce telling me how Wynn had used the internet to contact her to advocate and care for me. Recalling this, I remembered that I was loved. I felt warmth, relief, and ease in my body. Although still in pain, I could be still, and sleep came quickly. In the beginning, I first had perceived myself as alone in facing terrible pain and loss. As my perception yielded to a sweeter reality because love began pouring in. There were cards and letters and prayers and emails from far and wide. Later came more calls and meals and rides and gifts and contributions to help provide various supports. This love blew me away. It was led to another spiritual gift because, well, I couldn't, this idea of being alone had faded in a sense. A lot of things just changed as a result of the love. I began thinking, acting, and responding more positively and effectively. I became determined to recover. Staff responded to me with warmth. Resources fell in my lap. The support and love I received helped me sustain me through physical and emotional pain. When with spirit lifted, I found the stamina needed for hours of daily therapeutic activities, PT, weightlifting, swimming, gentle stretching. I received cranial sacral and EMDR therapies. I participated in fitness programs for people with mental and physical disabilities. Perhaps the greatest miracle is that I actually enjoyed myself. Yes, it was hard, and yes, there was pain, but the love, I really enjoyed much of that year. Repeatedly, I've said yes to life, to spirit, to energy, God, nature, and I'm thankful for doctors, nurses, therapists, agencies, advocates, friends, and family that help create miracles for me. I stand with humility and awe before the web of life of which we are part, the great mystery unfolding his existence. Okay, I'll add my marking. Well, that's the end of the first part. And again, in the honesty, it's not been, of course, it's not been all sunshine and rainbows. And now all that tension I got in the beginning, of course, it faded. And there's been a lot of time facing struggles alone. And that's consistently, I find the difference. And when I have connection, I'm looking right now at David and Deborah and Ian, and they so represented. I got cards from them that there was like said with pictures of their hat on, and the second picture off. We take our hats off to you for your recovery. So I'm fortunate enough that I got as better as I have. So I was using a wheelchair, for example, for 6 months. And a lot of learning from the experience. I'm concerned about time, so I won't delve into that. But there was actually a morning, and my speech, well, too, couldn't speak, and I had to learn to speak again. And there was some morning and learning, leaving that world, leaving my brothers and sisters that are still using wheelchairs all the time. And, you know, it's hard to explain exactly. But I got good enough that my disabilities became invisible, or at least not glaring anymore. Big difference in how I'm treated from those days to now. And most want to say is that just because you can't see it, it doesn't mean it's not there. And another spiritual gift that I've learned is that, you know, this is why the labels don't really, they do some good sometimes and some hard sometimes. But I think we are all disabled, or at least I can tell you this, you don't know how people struggle. And my accident, wow, it cracked me open in not a pleasant way either, in terms of feeling and seeing so much more suffering. It's kind of like, you know, a lot of people have said, what a year 2020 is like. Well, I've had a few of them in a row, but they're there. And a lot of times when I've been very positive and talked about I'm gonna do it and this is going well, people say it's inspiring, and that's meaningful to me. I love to be inspiring. And honestly, a lot of times when I have shared my struggles, many people have thanked me too for that because they're struggling. But a lot of times when I try to tell people about the struggles, I don't really like the responses. You know, I interpret, they seem to me to be advising, educating, or oh, that's not so bad, or we all getting old, we all forget, like, because a lot of my, the brain injury, a lot of the things come down to a difficulty concentrating. Now it's true, I had trouble just, you know, concentrating, focusing before the accident. And sure, a lot of people, many of you sometimes forget your keys, or I say, you know, did you ever drive by your exit? And people say, of course. But it's like on my worst days, it was one forgetting after another. I couldn't remember what I'm thinking and stuff. And that's different. You know, imagine if you missed the same exit 5 times in a row. I haven't done that, but I'm on more mundane level all the time. So that's what I say. there's aspects, and I've just crested the service, and I don't, and then and now, it's hard to talk about the hard stuff. I really don't want pity. I really don't. I am learning. I am learning that I need help, and to ask for help and to accept help. And as I say, we all need help. So there's much more. And I said, I'm just my experience. Your experience of a brain injury or mental disability might be completely different. And hopefully I haven't talked so long, there's no time for questions and answers. But whatever happens, this is a long journey. And I thank you again for the honor getting to share my story and be heard about that. And I hope it has been useful. Thank you. How about do we have time for questions?
I'm not seeing any. Thank you for speaking and sharing your story and your insights about your own journey and about the gifts. I'm not seeing any questions yet. Julie, are you seeing anything? I was taking notes when you were speaking, Philip. I'm watching the chat to see what comes up. No questions yet. Oh, hi, Rev Phil. How was your experience on the how has the experience on the Great Peace March influenced you?
Ben Zeman, soon-to-be minister. Yeah, so Ben will tell you this is true. There are many experiences. So Ben and I, in 1986, and 500 other people plus, we walked across the country for global nuclear disarmament. And there was one of many things that set me up to be able to handle this kind of adversity. Because one of the biggest lessons, we called it Peace March magic. There's so many times, we think we gotta figure it all out. And we got to have everything in order. And we had so many things that went wrong, but time and time again, the people came through for us. The biggest known example is that the parent organization that Pro-Peace that led us there went bankrupt, and we were bussed up in Barstow in the desert. And I was one, and many of us, we had no fear. Because the peace movement is bigger than little organization, and the people help came from all over, and it kept coming the whole time. And that been Peace March magic, and it's like that and like two. Thank you.
The other question you have, first of all, someone said, I love the concept of post-traumatic spiritual gifts. And somebody else said, please tell us about the Crisis Alternatives Program.
I would love to do that. So I have had the privilege of starting one of the first programs of kind. There's many more of them there. And it was this particular one, we had a grant from the Office of Mental Health in New York to reduce, ideally to zero, the use of force and violence in the county's mental health crisis response. This is still a hot topic again in terms of, how we deal with crisis and forth. And if you think of that, a lot of times people's entry into the system or in crisis, they tell somebody there's distress, they tell the therapist or doctor they're going to kill themselves or say something like, whatever. And they get the cops call them, and they push kids in handcuffs, and they get taken to the hospital against the will, and maybe shot up with drugs that they won't, and told they're mentally ill and they have an illness and they're going to be like that the rest of their lives. And I ask you, if those people were being overwhelmed before, they have doubts about their ability to navigate the difficulties of life, would they be more likely or less likely after an experience like that to have the confidence that they could face life? It's obvious, right? Okay, we came out with an alternative, a number of alternatives, tiers, but we were non-medical, peer support. The 90% of the calls are handled by handled just being on the phone. We have community centers. They could be peer support there, and there was another kind of business, and the highest level was the respite, a safe house. And this concept evolved over years into community centers, but combination. But a place instead of the hospital that people could go and be with others that had maybe been through some kind of similar experience, having been overwhelmed, having been suicidal, or having seen things and distressing like that. And we have emerged a wisdom in this movement that David and I know about. That's how to midwife people in crisis, mental and emotional crisis, not to fix it. In fact, that's the crisis alternative program. What I did, I sought after, hired a staff and trained the staff. And this very simply was how I ran. What I told them was, we're not going to fix people's problems. In fact, what I want you to do is to curb that very natural and wonderful desire to help, and instead listen. Let them tell you what they're asking for. Let them figure out for themselves how they want to resolve their crisis by asking questions, but not to redirect, just to understand what they're saying. And it's amazing how well it worked and continues to work. So that's a little bit of an overview of the Crisis Alternatives Program. And as I said, it's part of, now the popular term is the respite part of it. It's much more to it, but it means a non-medical alternative, safe place for people to go, get peer support, and find their way through whatever they're going through.
Thank you for explaining that. There are 3 more questions, and I want to give you some time. I'm aware of time, and I want you to be able to have closing words if you want. Here, a question from Toby. Hi, Phil. Were you conscious of being yourself even when all the strange and bizarre stuff was happening? Did you have a sense of you being the observer of all of this? In other words, a soul that was above you?
Oh, absolutely. I wish I could tell you I had the kind of near-death experience everybody tells you, the light and everything's, no, I didn't. This denial came from, you know, I just woke up and it was like I was the same, and I was thinking the same, and I understood everything people said most of the time. Oh, caveat or a digression for a second. This is a piece of the TBI that I explained. Something that stayed the same from then to now, but changed. It's gotten better and better, but what's remained the same, when I woke up, let's say at that time, 80% of the time, everything seemed the same. I could understand but then all of a sudden, in the case of what I mentioned before, the noise bothered me. And it was like, I just couldn't handle it. So I had my new normal and my new too much. And that has continued to this day, but it's changed and I've learned how to deal with. But that's what it's like, because there's been these, I didn't know how to describe it. At first I said mood swings, but it's not really mood swings. It's just like things are very different. So if I'm contradicting myself, in one sense, they're the same. I'm still here, I'm still me. And fortunately, I had learned a degree of mindfulness, so it doesn't take me completely to be able to observe, as you said, Toby. Hi, Toby. But there's also this experience of what's going on. I mean, like just being flooded by thoughts and feelings. And that's part of my experience to this day. Thank you. Great question.
You ready
You
for
alluded, I didn't really get to, but you get to consciousness and experiences that are beyond speaking and reason. And yeah, I don't know what to say about that, except it's true. They were, I'm lucky that they're part before the accident and still, and that's a big part of why I think, have a religion as its past, is for us to cultivate awareness and consciousness and experience of things that don't always fit in rational reason, blah, 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 like this. But it's like, wow. Thank you.
Here's a question from Carol. She says, what is the single most effective bit of advice that you believe will enhance accessibility in our UU congregations?
Well, okay, the general in this, from the general to specific. The general I mentioned already is almost, I'm not prepared to elaborate on this too much, but it's like, it's such a big spiritual principle and so big in our tradition, this idea of not having the truth. So, and in theological terms, I could put it this way of like this, that the big, what some people call God, or the big is, the reality, awesome, it's bigger than our stories. It's bigger than our ideas. And each person is a manifestation of that divine. And when we think, and this is the key, we will think we know them already, or we have the answer, or we know what's going on. But when we realize that we don't, and they are a revelation, and let the situation, let's learn together. That's the general principle. And be willing. So if I'm repeating myself, no, I didn't say this. We used to get a cultural competency trainings.
Yep.
Over time, we now have cultural sensitivity. It means it's not about being an academic expert, or they're the expert, or you're the expert, but can we learn together, and can we be willing to admit that we're imperfect and make mistakes? Don't be so afraid to make mistakes. You will hurt people's feelings, etc. But just be willing to learn, and we will keep learning together. Thank you.
Before we go on, I just want to do a time check. David, as the chair, or one of the co-chairs of the Access Committee, do we need to do a hard stop at 3, or there are 2 more questions?
I think it's really the 2 ministers and Suzanne. I can keep going forever, but
I think it's really up to the 2 ministers and Suzanne. I can keep going forever, but
how are y'all?
how are you all?
Well, although it's painful to cut off people's questions, I'm grateful for the worship framework that we have, and let's accept that the discussion is going to be continuing. And I'm sorry I got to talk and maybe you didn't get to ask your question, but I'm like, let's do our ritual and close it out in the agreed upon time, and then let's keep talking. Let's keep learning. Thank you. That's okay.
You know what? That's great, Philip. I appreciate it. I believe the next thing that is happening is that we have a hymn, and then we have the chalice extinguishing. And just so you know, there are 2 people want to know what's next for you. That's just something that maybe at some point you could communicate.
Me too.
Oh yeah, I bet you too. Yeah, that's that whole thing about no control and, being totally mindful and present. the song that that has been chosen is "Come and Go With Me." The words are on your screen, or they were. There you go.
You're unmuted.
As we extinguish our chalice flames, I read the adapted words of Reverend Matt Mayer. May we go forward in purposeful rhythm, that we may give voice to the melody of our imaginations, the music of our souls, and the possibilities of a just and verdant world as we might together create it. Amen, and blessed be.
Thanks. Thank you.
Thank you.
Achu.
Achu.
I'm gonna end the webinar right now. Thank you, Reverend Phillip. Thank you, David, for putting it together. Be well. Be well.
Thank you. Thank you. Redlow. Thank you.
Thank you. Take good care.